Welcome back to AU Family Channel, and thank you so much for being here. It truly means the world to have you as one of our loyal listeners. If our stories have ever touched your heart, we are so grateful that you keep coming back to spend this time with us. So find somewhere comfortable, take a slow, deep breath, and let us begin today's story, together. The storm that knocked out the power for 4 days did not just take the lights. It took away every single wall my family had built to avoid looking at each other. For a year and a half we had lived in the same house like three strangers who happened to share a kitchen, each of us drowning in a grief we never once spoke aloud. And then the sky opened up, the whole town went dark, and there was suddenly nowhere left for any of us to hide. This is the story of the 4 nights the storm trapped us together, and how, by the light of a single candle, my broken family finally learned to see each other again after so long. To understand what those 4 dark nights meant, you have to understand how quiet our house had become. I was 16 years old, and I lived with my mother and my older brother Daniel, who was 18. Once, a long time ago, we had been loud. We had been a family that argued about music in the car and laughed too hard at dinner and left the television on just for the noise of company. But by the time the storm came, our home had gone silent in a way that had nothing to do with peace. We passed each other in hallways without speaking. We ate at different times on purpose. We had become 3 people simply surviving under the same cold roof. The silence started the night my father died. It was a wet, ugly night 18 months before the storm, the kind of rain that turns roads into black glass. I had gone to a friend's house across town, and when it got late I called my dad to come and get me, the way I always did. He said he would be there soon. He never made it. His car slid on a flooded bend 2 streets from my friend's house, and just like that the center of our whole world was gone. He was driving through that rain for one reason only. He was coming to pick me up. And I have carried the weight of that single fact every day since. I never told anyone what I truly believed, but I believed it with my entire body. I believed my father was dead because of me. If I had not called. If I had stayed the night. If I had simply walked home in the rain like a normal kid, he would still be alive. That guilt grew inside me like a black root, and it changed the shape of who I was. I stopped talking about him. I stopped talking about almost anything. And because I could not bear my own guilt, I did the cowardly thing that guilt makes you do. I decided everyone else must blame me too, and I pushed them away before they could ever say it out loud. My mother tried, in the beginning. She would knock on my door and ask if I wanted to talk, and I would tell her I was fine and turn up my music. She would make my favorite dinner, and I would take my plate to my room. Every time she reached toward me, I flinched away, because I was certain that behind her sad eyes was a mother who could not look at the daughter who got her husband killed. So I built a wall, brick by brick, out of headphones and closed doors and one-word answers. And the more she tried, the higher I built it, until eventually, worn down and grieving herself, she stopped trying at all. My brother Daniel was the worst of it, or so I thought. He went cold and hard almost overnight. He barely looked at me. He would leave a room when I entered it, and when he did speak to me his voice had an edge I could not understand. I told myself the truth was obvious. Daniel hated me. Daniel blamed me for our father dying, and unlike our mother he was not going to pretend otherwise. So I hated him right back. It was easier than being sad. We turned into 2 teenagers waging a silent war across a hallway, and neither of us had any idea that we were actually fighting the exact same enemy, which was our own unbearable guilt. By the time I was 16, we had perfected the art of avoiding one another. We had our phones, our screens, our separate little glowing worlds that let us live in the same house without ever truly being in it. I would lie on my bed for hours scrolling through nothing, letting the light of the screen keep the silence company. Daniel did the same behind his door. My mother filled every evening with the television and her laptop and the low hum of anything that was not the sound of us not speaking. Technology was the perfect hiding place. As long as we each had a screen to stare into, none of us ever had to look at what we had lost. And then the weather report started, though none of us paid them much attention at first. A huge storm was rolling in off the coast, they said, the biggest in decades. My mother mentioned it once at the kitchen counter, to no one in particular, the way she said most things now. She told us to charge our phones and maybe fill some jugs with water, just in case. I remember nodding without looking up. Daniel did not answer at all. We had grown so used to ignoring each other that we very nearly ignored the warning that was about to change everything. If I had known what those 4 days would give back to us, I think I would have run toward that storm instead of away from it. It hit on a Thursday evening, and it hit harder than anyone expected. The wind came first, howling around the corners of the house and throwing rain against the windows in great rattling sheets. Trees bent low in the yard. Somewhere down the street a fence tore loose and went tumbling into the dark. We were each in our usual corners, glowing screens in hand, when the lights flickered once, twice, and then died completely. The whole house dropped into blackness. The heater fell silent. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. And in that sudden, total dark, I heard my mother call out to make sure Daniel and I were all right, and for the first time in a year and a half, we both answered her. We found each other in the living room by the weak light of dying phones. My mother had already lit 2 candles she kept in a drawer for emergencies, and their small orange glow pushed the dark back into the corners of the room. For a while we just sat there, listening to the storm tear at the house, waiting for the power to come back the way it always did. But it did not come back. An hour passed, and then 2, and the candles burned lower, and slowly it began to sink in that this was not a quick outage. Outside, the whole town had gone black. No streetlights. No neighbors' windows. Just the storm, and the dark, and the 3 of us in a circle of candlelight. Our phones died one by one over that first long night. Mine went first, and I felt something close to panic as the screen went black in my hand, my last little door out of the room slammed shut. Daniel's lasted a bit longer, and then it was gone too. My mother's followed by morning. With no power to charge them, our phones became nothing but cold, useless rectangles of glass, and just like that the entire world we had been hiding inside simply vanished. No messages. No videos. No endless scroll to keep our eyes busy and our hearts closed. For the first time in as long as I could remember, there was absolutely nothing to look at in that house except each other. The first full day was agony, and I am not too proud to admit it. Without my screen I did not know what to do with my own hands. I paced. I stared out at the rain. I tried to read a book by the window and could not focus on a single sentence. The house was cold and getting colder, and the quiet between us had a new, sharper edge now that there was nowhere to escape it to. We orbited each other stiffly, 3 people who had forgotten how to simply be in a room together. I kept waiting for the power to return and set us free. I had no idea that the thing I was so desperate to escape was the very thing about to save us. Hunger, of all things, was what first made us speak. By that evening the food in the fridge was beginning to warm, and my mother said we ought to cook what we could before it spoiled. She lit the gas stove with a match, since the electric ignition was dead, and asked, quietly, if we would help. And because there was nothing else in the world to do, we did. Daniel chopped vegetables by candlelight. I stirred a pot I could barely see into. My mother moved between us, and for a few minutes the kitchen smelled warm and alive again. We did not talk about anything real. But we were in the same small pool of light, doing the same small task, and it was a beginning. We ate that meal together at the table, all three of us, for the first time in longer than I could remember. The candles threw our shadows huge against the walls. Outside the storm still raged, but inside there was this fragile little warmth, the clink of forks, the steam rising off our plates. Nobody said much. But nobody left, either. Nobody carried their plate off to a dark room to eat alone. We just sat in that trembling orange light and ate, and I caught my mother looking at the two of us with an expression I could not name, something like sadness and hope tangled together. When the meal was over, we did not scatter. We stayed. And the staying was everything. That second night, with nothing to distract us, we ended up sitting together in the living room around the candles simply because it was the only warm and lighted place left in the house. My mother wrapped us all in blankets. The rain drummed steadily on the roof. And a strange thing began to happen in that enforced closeness. The silence between us, which had been so hard and hostile for so long, started to soften into something else. It became the silence of people who are simply too tired to keep fighting. I found myself watching the candle flame bend and flicker, and I felt, for the first time in 18 months, the smallest crack open in the wall I had spent so long building. It was Daniel who spoke first, and it caught me completely off guard. Out of the long quiet he said, into the dark, that he missed Dad. Just that. 3 plain words that none of us had dared say out loud in a year and a half. I froze. My mother went very still. And then, slowly, she said that she missed him too, every single day. The words seemed to change the air in the room. Something that had been locked tight for so long shifted just slightly on its hinges. I did not say anything yet. I was not ready. But I sat there in the candlelight listening to my family finally speak my father's memory aloud, and my throat ached with everything I was holding in. We talked, carefully, about the small things first. My mother remembered how Dad used to burn every breakfast he ever attempted. Daniel remembered the terrible songs he sang in the car, loud and off-key and completely shameless. I felt a laugh rise up in me, surprising and painful, the first real laugh I had shared with them since he died. For a little while we were not 3 strangers guarding old wounds. We were a family remembering a man we all loved. But underneath the warmth I could feel the deeper thing pressing up, the truth I had never told, the guilt I had carried alone. And I could feel that this dark, quiet, candlelit room was slowly pulling it out of me whether I wanted it to or not. It was the 3rd night when the wall finally came down, and it came down all at once. We were sitting close around the last of the candles when my mother turned to me, her face soft and terribly sad in the low light, and she said there was something she had needed to tell me for a very long time. My heart began to pound. Here it was, I thought. Here was the moment she finally said it, the thing I had been bracing for since the night my father died. She was going to tell me it was my fault. She was going to blame me at last. I held my breath and stared at the flame and waited for the words that would end me. But that is not what she said. She reached over and took my hand, and she told me that she had spent 18 months watching me pull away and had never understood why, until one terrible night a few months back when she heard me crying through my door and finally understood. She said, in a voice that shook, that she knew I blamed myself for Dad. And then she said the words that broke me completely open. She said it was never, ever my fault. She said a father driving through the rain to bring his child home safe is not a tragedy anyone caused. It is simply love, doing what love does. And she had never blamed me for one single second of it. I could not speak. 18 months of guilt came pouring up my throat and out of my eyes all at once. I told her everything then, in a broken rush, words I had never said to a living soul. I told her I had called him. I told her that if I had just stayed the night, he would still be here. I told her I had been so sure that she looked at me and saw the reason her husband was dead. And my mother pulled me into her arms and held me while I sobbed, and she kept saying, over and over, that I had lost my father, not caused it, and that she had been grieving right beside me the whole time. And then my mother said something that stopped my crying cold. She told me that if anyone in that house carried blame, it was her. Her voice cracked as she confessed that on the night Dad died, the two of them had argued. She had been exhausted and short with him, and when my call came in, she had told him, sharply, to go and get me himself. She had spent every day since wondering if she had sent him out into that rain. She, my strong and steady mother, had been drowning in the very same guilt as me, hiding it just as carefully, certain that Daniel and I must hate her for it. All this time, we had been carrying the same impossible weight in silence. Before I could even take that in, Daniel spoke, and his voice was nothing like the hard, cold voice I had learned to hate. It was small, and young, and full of tears. He said he had a confession too. He said that on the night Dad died, he was the one who was supposed to pick me up. Dad had asked him to keep his phone on in case I called. But Daniel had been out with his friends, and he had seen my missed call, and he had ignored it, just for a little while, just to finish what he was doing. By the time he checked again, Dad had already gone out into the storm. And Dad never came back. I sat there in the candlelight, stunned into silence, as the whole shape of the last 18 months rearranged itself in front of me. All this time I had thought my brother went cold because he blamed me. But Daniel had gone cold because he could not bear to look at me, the sister he thought he had failed. He had believed, every single day, that I would hate him if I ever knew the truth. His anger had never been aimed at me at all. It had been aimed at himself. He had built the exact same wall I had, out of the exact same guilt, and we had spent a year and a half hating each other across a hallway for a crime neither of us had committed. And so the truth of my whole family finally lay bare in the flickering light. 3 people who loved each other. 3 people who had each decided, in secret, that they alone were to blame for the same terrible night. 3 people who had turned their guilt into distance, and their distance into a year and a half of loneliness under one roof. We had not been angry with each other. We had been hiding from each other, each of us convinced we were the guilty one, each of us certain the others could not forgive what we could not forgive in ourselves. And it took losing the power, losing the screens, losing every place to hide, for any of us to finally say it out loud. What happened next is the thing I will remember for the rest of my life. My mother reached out and pulled both of us into her arms at the same time, and the 3 of us held on to each other and cried in a way we had never let ourselves cry before. Not alone in separate dark rooms, but together, in the same small circle of light, our tears mixing into something that felt almost like relief. 18 months of grief and guilt and silence broke apart all at once. I could feel my brother shaking. I could feel my mother's tears in my hair. And for the first time since my father died, I did not feel alone inside my own sorrow. We stayed up nearly the whole night after that, talking the way we used to talk, the words tumbling out of us as if a dam had finally burst. We forgave each other, though the strange truth was that there had never really been anything to forgive. Mostly we forgave ourselves. We talked about Dad, all the good things, the funny things, the way he loved us. We cried and then we laughed and then we cried again. And somewhere in that long, candlelit night, the 3 cold strangers who had been living in that house quietly disappeared, and in their place, slowly, a family began to come back to life. The storm was still howling outside. But inside, something broken had finally started to heal. The 4th day was different from all the ones before it. We woke to the same dark house, the same cold, the same rain against the glass, but everything inside us had changed. We moved through the day together instead of apart. My mother taught us the card games she had played as a girl, and we sat around the candles laughing over them for hours. Daniel and I actually talked, real conversations, the kind we had not had since we were small. There was an ease between us now, a lightness, as if we had each set down a stone we had been carrying for so long we had forgotten it was even there. The blackout had not lifted. But something much heavier had. That afternoon Daniel and I bundled up and went out into the gray drizzle to check on our elderly neighbor, an old woman who lived alone 2 doors down. We found her cold and a little frightened in her dark house, and without even discussing it, we brought her back to ours, wrapped her in blankets by our candles, and shared our warm food with her. She sat with us all evening, telling stories about the neighborhood from before we were born. And I realized, watching my brother laugh with this old woman by the candlelight, that the storm had not just repaired my family. It had cracked us open in a way that let the whole world back in. We had been closed for so long. On the 4th night, the last full night of the blackout, the 3 of us sat together and did something we had never done. We talked about the future. Not the past, for once, but what came next. My mother said, quietly, that she did not want to go back to how we had been living, 3 ghosts in one house. Daniel agreed. I agreed. We made promises to each other in that candlelight, small and sincere. We would eat dinner together. We would talk about Dad instead of pretending he had never existed. We would not disappear into our screens and our grief again. We had found our way back to each other in the dark, and we were not going to lose it in the light. The power came back late that night, and it happened all at once. The lights snapped on, bright and sudden and almost violent after 4 days of candlelight. The refrigerator shuddered awake. The television my mother had left switched on came blaring to life. All the machines of our old, hidden lives roared back at the exact same moment. And the strange thing, the thing I did not expect, was that none of us cheered. We just sat there, blinking in the harsh electric glare, and I think all 3 of us felt the same small pang of loss. Because we knew, without saying it, that the fragile, precious thing we had found in the dark was now going to have to survive the light. My mother stood up, walked over, and turned the television off. Then she went around the room and switched off the bright overhead lights, one by one, until only the soft glow of a single lamp remained. She came back and sat down with us, and she said that we could keep some of the dark if we wanted to. And so we did. We let our phones stay dead in the drawer a little longer. We stayed in that room together, in the gentle low light, and we kept talking, choosing each other over the glowing screens that had kept us apart for so long. The storm had ended. But we had decided, all 3 of us, to hold on to what it had given us. The days that followed tested us, the way ordinary life always tests the promises we make in extraordinary moments. It would have been so easy to slip back, to let the screens and the schedules and the busyness pull us apart again. And some days we did drift. But now, when the silence started to creep back in, one of us would notice it, and push against it. My mother would call us to the table. Daniel would knock on my door, not to fight, but to talk. I stopped hiding behind my headphones. We were not suddenly a perfect family. But we were a family that was trying, out loud, on purpose, and that made all the difference in the world. We started a small tradition after that, one we still keep to this day. Once a week, on a Thursday, the same night the storm first hit, we turn off every light in the house, put our phones away in a drawer, and light a single candle at the kitchen table. And in that soft, familiar dark, we talk. Really talk. We say the things that are hard to say in the bright, busy light of normal days. It was in the dark that we found each other again, and so we go back to the dark, on purpose, to make sure we never lose each other twice. My father would have loved it. Sometimes I think he is right there in the candlelight with us. I have thought a great deal about why it took a storm to save my family, and I believe I finally understand it. We had every possible tool to stay connected, and every one of them was actually keeping us apart. The phones, the screens, the endless noise and light and distraction gave each of us a place to hide our pain instead of sharing it. We were never too far apart to heal. We were too busy, too lit up, too plugged in to ever sit still long enough to see each other clearly. It took losing all of it, every single distraction, to finally leave us with nothing to look at but the faces of the people we loved most in the whole world. So here is the truth those 4 dark nights taught me, and I hope you will carry it with you. Sometimes everything has to stop before a family can finally see each other again. Sometimes the lights have to go out before you can see what has been sitting right beside you in the dark all along. If your house is full of quiet strangers who used to be the people you loved, you do not have to wait for a storm. You can turn off the screens. You can light the candle. You can sit down in the stillness and say the true thing you have been too afraid to say. The dark is not the enemy. Sometimes the dark is the only place we finally tell the truth. Thank you so much for staying with me all the way to the end of this story. It truly means the world to me that you are here. If my family's story touched something in you, please take a moment to give this video a like and to subscribe to AU Family Channel, where a brand new story is waiting for you every single week. And please remember this. Sometimes everything has to stop before a family can finally see each other again. So do not wait for your own storm. Turn off the lights tonight, sit down with the people you love, and say the true thing. I am so grateful you were here. And I will see you in the next one.